You and I suffer every day from an underintegrated, overworked mind. The mind stuck in overdrive, compulsively thinking all the time, dominating our attention, pulling us out of the present moment. A constant stream of thoughts, an internal narrative clumsily trying to describe and control everything, rather than just doing its job. Once we understand the mechanics of compulsive thinking, we can start to fix it. This is a topic I've been actively exploring for over 15 years, and recently it's come into focus more than ever, transforming my relationship with my mind. So I've literally spent the last 3 months editing and refining and developing this series for understanding the mind and demystifying the ego. Because if even one thing clicks in a new way for you, it can transform your relationship with your mind too. I honestly can't think of anything more worthwhile. So let's dive in to connect the dots and create mental clarity. The mind is an amazing tool for building conceptual models of reality. The problem is that we tend to confuse our mental models with reality itself. We pay more attention to what we think about what's happening than to what's happening. We pay more attention to the story we're telling about life than to life itself. The mind can make a low-resolution model to try to represent certain aspects of reality, and the model can be accurate or not about the elements it tries to represent. I think one of the best analogies for this is the map and the territory. The real world, of course, is infinitely complex, so each kind of map represents just the few aspects that are necessary for a specific task. A street map, for example, is for the specific task of navigating a city. And the map can be accurate or not. It might say that there's a shop 2 blocks to the west, and the shop might actually be exactly where it says on the map. Maybe it's that same general direction, the map sends us in the right direction, but it's actually a little bit further. Maybe it's completely the opposite direction, and maybe there's no shop at all, even though it says there is one on the map. If the map is accurate, it can help us to orient ourselves. So we definitely do want to make our maps as accurate as possible. But it's important to remember that even the most accurate map is very limited and not actually the streets that it represents. Now, that sounds obvious, of course, in the context of a street map, but we tend to confuse our mental maps with reality all the time without even realizing it. We each have a mental map of who we are, what we like, what we do, what we're good at, what we're bad at, as well as who other people in our lives are, how the world works. We have maps for big existential questions like what gives meaning in life and what is this all about? And we have maps for day-to-day things, the day of the week, what time it is, where we should go to eat, when, cultural things. Referencing the map is useful for planning, coordinating, and executing specific tasks. But we tend to walk through life figuratively staring at the map, assuming that it should provide all the information we need, and only looking up from the map when we bump or crash into something that's not on the map. Again, we pay more attention to our thoughts about what's happening than to what's happening. We pay more attention to our internal narrative about existence than to existence itself. There is nothing wrong with having a narrative or a story about life, just as long as we don't take it more seriously than we should, and certainly not confuse it with reality. Having a coherent narrative helps the mind to make sense of the world on a certain level, and can coexist with presence in the here and the now. With proper integration, the narrative can run lightly in the background, fluidly updating and refining itself in the subconscious, rather than being front and center on the stage of our attention all the time. As it is, the narrative tends to dominate our conscious attention, often narrowing our awareness down to just a clunky stream of words in the head. I often hear what I'm thinking louder than what you're saying to me, louder than music playing, even louder than the music I'm playing. As it is, we treat the narrative like reality rather than realizing that it's just a conceptual overlay which can provide us with useful context when it's helpful. By fully entering into our own narrative about life, we automatically just accept limiting beliefs about everything, including ourselves. We think we know who we are rather than discovering ourselves moment by moment. I think I'm this person named Samuel Wexler who plays the violin and blah, 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 blah. And a lot of those things may accurately represent things about me. But the reality of who I am goes way beyond any idea of who I am. Who you are is constantly changing and is ultimately a mystery beyond mental comprehension. I think the world around me is like this and that, and here's a tree, and here's my desk, my violin, here's my friend. And those may be functional labels and categories to help us communicate. But again, they're just labels, and the reality is infinitely more complex than my idea of it. Don't get me wrong, these concepts and labels aren't bad. They're very useful. But since we haven't learned to integrate them well, they cause serious problems. When the conceptual layer is better integrated, it can actually complement present awareness and expansion rather than limit it in this beautiful and fascinating dance between knowing and not knowing. As long as we don't treat the concepts as being more solid than they are, they can serve as a loose framework for further self-exploration and discovery. This is a beautiful example of what I'm calling paradoxical synergy, which we'll explore more in depth in an upcoming series. When we recognize concepts and beliefs for what they are, not confusing them with reality, we can use them as a springboard for more intentional exploration of the unknown, rather than them being walls and chains that keep us stuck in a fake sense of knowing as we often experience them. Even the most elaborate narrative or most detailed map will always reduce the complexity of reality. We cut ourselves off from the richness of life, then wonder why we feel like something is off or something is missing. We feel disconnected from life because we are. For me, simply understanding this helps me to start cultivating a healthier and more harmonious relationship with my mind, to understand the mind's role as the map maker, and to realize that I often confuse my maps with the territory, helps me to start looking up from the map more often. It's like writing a big disclaimer on the map that says, this map is not completely accurate, it's not complete, please look up from the map. And that's helpful. The trap, however, is to think that just reading the reminder to look up from the map is the same as actually looking up from the map. It's so easy to look at it and go, right, I should look up from the map. Instead of like, right, I actually have to look up. And that's a very different feeling. Like the feeling of being off script, the feeling of just taking in the world without the narrative running the show. That's a new feeling, and the map can't tell us how to find that feeling. It's a feeling we each have to find for ourselves and then continually practice shifting into that state. That's what I'm working on right now. Adding the disclaimer to the map, but then just reading it rather than looking up from the map, I think is the biggest trap that most spiritual people or seekers fall into. I absolutely fell into this so many years without having any idea that that's what I was falling into. And of course, I still have to be careful constantly in every moment not to fall into it. Now, this is something we'll explore in more detail in the third video of this series because this trap has lots of different variations, and it's actually quite easy to see once you know what you're looking for, but it's also extremely easy to miss if not. So stick with me in this series on demystifying the ego for more clarity on that trap. As my mind grasps that it should not be the focal point of my attention all the time, it's easier for me to start practicing shifting my awareness from my thoughts into awareness of the real world, and do that more often and for longer periods of time. As I notice the constant story that my mind is telling, and recognize in both my head and my heart that I have no reason to take that story so seriously, it starts to lose its grip on my attention. Again, it's kind of like adding a reminder into the script I have for life to remind me to look up from the script because it's improvising, it's not scripted. My tendency has always been to overly intellectualize everything. I love ideas and concepts and abstract thinking. So for me personally, it was a huge revelation when I started to realize the limits of my own mind. When the mind started to realize its own limits, it was like, whoa, Like realizing that it's irrational to depend completely on rationality, or that to depend on logic isn't actually logical, was a funny and ironic thing to finally understand, and helped give my own mind permission to relax itself a bit. Even if you're not as in love with the intellect as I naturally am, you probably still notice that you're thinking all the time and a constant stream of words in your head, giving a lot of attention to the story. If you haven't noticed this, just take a minute, whenever, to just breathe and feel the breath coming in and out, and just keep your attention on that. You might be different, but most of us experience that even if we're trying to just pay attention to the breath, that before long, the mind starts yapping about something. And that before we know it, our attention is almost completely wrapped up in the yapping. The constant yapping is the mind trying to control and understand everything. And it's helped me so much to just simply realize that it cannot, that it's not irresponsible for me to just let it relax and take a break more. I don't need to figure it all out. I can't figure it all out. The constant excessive thinking usually isn't actually figuring anything out anyway, just spinning in circles. Even when the goal is to figure it out, I can trust that my subconscious mind will do most of that heavy lifting and will be better able to present me in my conscious mind with the solutions more elegantly if I relax and give it space to do its thing. It's okay to let it go. More than okay, it's often actually more responsible to let it go. I can just relax and observe life playing out all around me. And that's a relief. Why does the mind feel the need to figure everything out? Why do we tend to hide away from the mystery and complexity of existing and existence, preferring to know who we are and what's going on? Why? Why are we lost in the mind? Why do we confuse ourselves with this low-resolution mental projection of ourselves that we sometimes call the ego? If the mind is a tool at our disposal, why does it control us rather than we control it? This is a question I've been asking for many years now, but we have to work together to answer these types of big questions. I'll share my thoughts with you in the next video. Leave comments on what you think. If you resonate with what I'm putting in the effort to share with you here, consider subscribing. And in the description, there's a link to the Harmonious Reality newsletter, in which this series is just one part of a project for cultivating more harmony inside and out. And you can find the full playlist for this series on demystifying the ego and understanding the mind. I love you.